We're back now with our breaking news. President Trump lashing out at Attorney General Jeff Sessions, former FBI Director James Comey, Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and others. Here to discuss, Bill Kristol, editor-at-large at the Weekly Standard, senior political commentator Steve Israel, a former Democratic congressman from New York, and political commentator Alice Stewart, a Republican strategist. So let's start. It's a blockbuster story. No one is spared. Sessions isn't spared, Comey isn't spared, Mueller isn't spared, Rod Rosenstein isn't spared. What's going on here? What did you think of this interview?
I think Donald Trump is obsessed with this investigation, and one has to always come, and that he very much resented the fact, as he says, that Attorney General Sessions recused himself, though he was just doing what the Ethics Council of Justice advised him to do. But think about this for a minute. Everyone takes it as, well, he's a psychologically weird guy. Why is Donald Trump so worried about this investigation? I always come back to that. He's worried about this investigation because he's worried about what they can find. He's not irrationally worried about this investigation. He knows there are real problems, I believe, in his campaign's conduct with respect to Russia, perhaps in his own dealings with Russia, his family's dealings with Russia, other financial dealings. You saw the way he bristled in the interview, apparently, right, when Maggie Haberman and the other New York Times reporters say, oh, you better not look at the financial stuff. You know what? If you've lived a straightforward life and you don't have much to hide, you don't say, oh, my God, no one can look at the financial stuff, right?
Here's what's perplexing to me, Alice, is that so many people in this country, millions upon millions of people, all Americans, are affected by health care, right? That was a big story of the day. The person who's affected most by this investigation is Donald Trump. Why is he focusing on the thing that affects him rather than the thing that affects the people he is supposed to be serving?
Because in his mind, everything is about him. And the reality is, look, you can sit there and criticize the media and those for talking about Russia, 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 but the best way to get them to stop talking about it is to stop talking about it yourself and give an interview to the New York Times about health care and what you're going to do to repeal and replace Obamacare and bring members of the Senate together. And look, this is his MO. When someone stands up to him, he publicly criticizes them and shames them and hopefully into submission. And he did the same thing to Heller this afternoon. Look, you go back 4 months ago when Sessions recused himself in this case, he had no choice. It's improper for him to be investigating a campaign that he was part of. And the optics moving forward for him to be investigating a campaign he was part of would have been much worse than him recusing. So unfortunately, I think the president needs to get in his head. The Russia investigation has nothing to do with his winning the presidency. He won fair and square. Let's move forward. And if there's nothing to hide, don't shy away from anyone that's shining a light on it.
Mm-hmm. Steve, so much blaming going on. Sessions should never have recused himself. Comey's testimony is, quote, loaded up with lies. Mueller has tons of conflicts of interest. Why is it everyone else's fault? I mean, the president and this administration, have they not made some critical mistakes here that they're not accepting responsibility for?
Well, I mean, that is the MO of this administration. When something goes wrong, it's fake news. When there's an investigation, there shouldn't have been. The Attorney General should have recused. I was on the Hill all day today talking to my former colleagues, and this kind of stuff drives them crazy. Just a few hours ago, the Republican House members were saying, well, the president is there's going to be a meeting tonight of senators, the president's going to be on message, we're going to finally get repeal and replace or repeal and delay, whatever it is, we're going to get it behind us. And then a few hours later, they're talking about everything but health care. And the final point I would make, Don, is
before your final point, he's supposed to be today, wasn't it kumbaya, sort of, I'm going to win these guys over and get the health care bill through? Wasn't that what it's supposed to be?
Yes,
That's not doing this. This is alienating them, isn't it?
Well, first of all, today, he basically threatened Senator Heller from Nevada. That's not a way of winning people over. And then he goes off message on this. Fundamentally, this is an administration that wants to keep moving beyond the Russia story, and it is the president who continues to blow oxygen into the Russia story and create a new news cycle.
Make your third point real quick, and I want to play that part of this with Heller. But do you remember what your third point was?
No. The point was that the White House says we have to get beyond the Russia story, and the president keeps writing the narrative.
Yeah. This is a moment that you were talking about. President Trump is speaking to Senator Dean Heller, about Senator Dean Heller, who had been against the health care bill. Senator Heller is seated next to him. I just want to set this up so you know. Next to the president on the left of your screen. So watch his reaction as the president goes on.
The other night I was very surprised when I heard a couple of my friends, they really were and are. They might not be very much longer, but that's okay. I think I have to get him back. That's right. I refuse. Well, no, you didn't go out there. This was the one we were worried about. You weren't there, but you're going to be. You're going to be there. Look, he wants to remain a senator, doesn't he? Okay. And I think the people of your state, which I know very well, I think they're going to appreciate what you hopefully will do.
Bill?
I mean, look, Donald Trump is a vindictive, narcissistic bully, in my opinion, and you see that behavior there with Senator Heller.
It was a light
and
moment?
I thought it was semi-light, but beneath the lightness was nastiness. And I wish Senator Heller had sort of said, you know what, I won my state, you didn't win my state, and I work for the people of my state, and you can forget it, you know, just I'll make my decision based on the merits. But I come back to the Russia thing. The truth is, Trump does not go after everyone the way the way he's obsessed with Russia, the way he went after Sessions today. Trump doesn't, I think, is unhappy with various of his cabinet appointments, some of his staff. You get leaks that he doesn't like this or that, Reince Priebus is in trouble. The degree of his sensitivity on Russia is unique. And I come back to asking, why is that? Why is that?
Yeah, Alice, that is a good question. Why is that, Alice?
Well, clearly he has it in his head that the only reason people are bringing up the Russia investigation because their influence and interruption in the campaign affected the outcome of the election, and he isn't the president of the United States.
Alice,
no, that's too nice, Alice.
Yeah.
Maybe he also has in his head that he did things wrong, that his campaign did things wrong with respect to Russia, that there's fire beneath that smoke.
But for as a journalist, it doesn't have anything to do with his son meeting with a Russian lawyer, with his Michael Flynn having to resign, with his attorney general having to recuse himself, and on and on and on. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's just that he thinks that it sort of undermines his credibility as president to say that, thinking that he didn't win fair and square.
I think it's both. Clearly it's both, but the only thing that he will continue to say publicly is that it undermines his victory. But clearly there's a lot of smoke here, and right now it's turning into fire. The more he continues to point the fingers and try and intimidate those that are trying to investigate this, the optics are really bad.
Steve, the president dismissed questions about his second undisclosed meeting with Vladimir Putin, saying that it was only 15 minutes. That contradicts witnesses there and what White House sources told our Jeff Zeleny, which is that it was, you know, an hour-long meeting. Why would the president say something that could so easily be proven false?
Well, because this president is used to saying things that can be proven false. The facts and truth don't necessarily get in the way of this president. That is how he operates, and that is a fundamental part of the problem. You know, when you're in politics and you know that something you say can be disproven, don't say it. He hasn't learned that lesson yet.
Thank you all. When we come back, President Trump seems to be picking a fight with his own attorney general tonight, not to mention taking potshot at his former FBI director and the special counsel. All this as he marks his first 6 months in office.
At Southern New Hampshire University, we're proud to be one of the most affordable providers of high-quality online education. We're
CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news tonight on two huge stories. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. President Trump on fire about the Russia investigation, unloads on his own attorney general, the FBI director he fired, and the special counsel investigating it all. I want you to listen to what he tells the New York Times about Jeff Sessions.
Sessions should have never recused himself. And if he was going to recuse himself, he should have told me before he took the job, and I would have picked somebody else.
Mm-hmm. He gave you no heads up at all in any sense.
Zero.
Okay.
So Jeff Sessions takes the job, gets into the job, recuses himself. I then have, which frankly, I think is very unfair to the president. How do you take a job and then recuse yourself? If he would have recused himself before the job, I would have said, thanks, Jeff, but I can't, I'm not going to take you.
President also accuses FBI Director James Comey of using that infamous dossier as leverage over him, and issues a warning to the special counsel, Robert Mueller, about delving too far into his family's finances. This comes as we're learning tonight dates are set next week for his son Don Jr., his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and former campaign manager Paul Manafort to testify under oath in the Russia investigation. Plus this, Senator John McCain, patriot, presidential candidate, war hero, facing another battle tonight, diagnosed with brain cancer. Our Dr. Sanjay Gupta has exclusive information on that tonight amid an outpouring of support for the Senator. Let's get right now to that explosive interview, though, with President Trump. Joining me now on the phone is New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman. Maggie, you conducted that interview. I mean, blockbuster is, I think, too small a word for this interview. The president blasting his Attorney General Jeff Sessions over Russia. Is his position in jeopardy?
I think that the president has been very upset with Jeff Sessions for quite some time. My colleague Peter Baker, he was one of the people who I conducted the interview with, as long as Michael Schmidt. We had reported a few weeks ago that the president, essentially had not stopped blaming Sessions, that he had been angry at him this whole time. I've heard from several sources that has remained true in recent weeks, that his frustration with Sessions and belief that he would not be in this situation had Sessions not recused himself over Russia is very real. I think that he knows that he can't fire the Attorney General. I think that he recognizes that that is not where this is going, and I do think that his anger at him is sincere and genuine. I'm not saying it's necessary, where it should be, but that is how he feels. But if anything, I think he may be, and I am speculating here, trying to make it very hard for Jeff Sessions to remain on the job. Remember, Jeff Sessions offered to resign in a sort of half-hearted way several weeks ago. He has already been uncomfortable and put into a bad position, and I think you could see a scenario where the president, who doesn't like to fire anybody under the best of circumstances, but who certainly knows that it would be problematic right now to fire the Attorney General amid these investigations, is creating a situation where it's untenable for Sessions to remain.
Yeah, it goes on to say, he says, would he have recused himself before the job, I would have said, thanks, Jeff, but I'm not going to take you. It's extremely unfair, and that's a mild word to the president. So the question is here, is he trying to force Jeff Sessions' hand? You said maybe he is sending a message to Jeff Sessions, but no comment from Jeff Sessions tonight.
Well, I think Jeff Sessions is deciding what he can do. I think that Jeff Sessions is not a bare-knuckled fighter. I could see him leaving. I could also see him deciding to stay on. And believing that he is doing the right thing for the administration and the country by staying on.
Hey, Maggie, can we go through some of this? Because I want to talk about Jeff Sessions. I want to talk about Comey. I want to talk about Rod Rosenstein and a bunch of things that he mentions here. He also faulted Mr. Sessions for his testimony. I'm reading from the New York Times. His testimony during Senate confirmation hearings, when Mr. Sessions said that he had not met with any Russians, even though he had met at least twice with Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Jeff Sessions gave some bad answers, the president said. He gave some answers that were simple questions and should have been simple, and it goes on, it should have been simple answers, but weren't. And again, a spokesman for Jeff Sessions declined to comment. So he wasn't happy with that testimony.
No, I mean, he was frustrated that, look, I mean, to be fair to the president, there are a lot of people who have said that they think that Jeff Sessions took what was a pretty simple question of what were your contacts, and he turned it into a very complicated moment by not being forthcoming. So I think it's not surprising that the president is frustrated and upset by that moment. I just think what's more remarkable is hearing him be so openly critical on the record and say that he wouldn't have chosen him had he.
But isn't it interesting that everyone thought it was behind us because we asked if he had confidence in Jeff Sessions at the time during that questioning and when he had to recuse himself, and he said yes. Everyone at the White House said yes. They called it fake news, but apparently, even though it's been months ago, some time ago, that looks like it was not true.
I don't actually remember them saying yes. Forgive me if I'm misremembering, but my memory of those responses was that they didn't respond. I think that Sean Spicer was asked repeatedly whether the president had confidence in Jeff Sessions, and he declined to answer the question. So I don't think that this is a departure from that. I think this is pretty in keeping with it.
Let's talk about Comey now, because he made an explosive charge against the former FBI Director James Comey, accusing him of using that dossier containing some of those salacious details to show the president has something on him, he says. Is the president now saying that the then FBI Director essentially threatened him with that dossier?
I think threatened is not the right word, but I think certainly was trying to, use what he had for maximum positioning to retain his job, seemed to be what the president was saying.
To retain his job.
Yeah, that he wanted to keep his job, so he was sort of telling the president, what what he had in his possession.
That it was leverage over him. He was trying to use it as leverage. Let me see, the quote says in the interview, Mr. Trump said he believed that Mr. Comey told him about the dossier to implicitly make clear he had something to hold over the president. In my opinion, he shared it so that I would think that he had it out there, Mr. Trump said, as leverage. Yeah, I think so, Mr. Trump said. In retrospect, he thinks it was leverage. Maggie, the president took on the special counsel Robert Mueller as well, accusing him of running an investigation full of conflicts of interest and warning him about digging into his money. And I want to quote here, all right, because this is from your article. It said, asked if Mr. Mueller's investigation would cross a red line if it expanded to look at his family's finances beyond any relationship to Russia. Mr. Trump said, I would say yes. He would not say what he would do about it, but I think that's a violation. Look, this is about Russia. So is he making the case here to fire, the possibility of firing Robert Mueller?
It's a great question, Don, and we tried pressing him repeatedly about where he is on this and what he would be willing to do. Both Mike Schmidt and I did. He wouldn't go there, and I think he was very, very consciously not going there. What I think he's doing is something that you and I have both seen him do repeatedly over many years, which is keep his options open. He very rarely rules something out. He doesn't always rule something in. I think that he likes having the option open of potentially firing Mueller, regardless of how dangerous a proposition he may know that is.
Okay. So he's unhappy with Mueller. He's unhappy with Comey. He's unhappy with Sessions. He's unhappy with Rod Rosenstein, which you mentioned in the article. He's also unhappy, who is a former federal prosecutor, said he's from Baltimore. He was upset that Rod Rosenstein was from Baltimore, and he didn't know that. Why was that upsetting to him? Because it was a Democratic city?
Yeah, I don't think that it was so much that he was upset that he was from Baltimore, per se. I think it's just that he questioned sort of the political leanings, not overtly, of Rod Rosenstein. The president tends to sort of boil things down to politics and people choosing a side.
Let me read it here. It says, the president also expressed discontent with Deputy Attorney General Rod J. Rosenstein, a former federal prosecutor from Baltimore. When Mr. Sessions recused himself, the president said he was irritated to learn where his deputy was from. There are very few Republicans in Baltimore, if any, he said, of the predominantly Democratic city. Is this a strange thing? It sounds like a strange thing for someone to say.
It's how he views it. I can't explain it. What do you think?
Okay, and then the reason I say that because Andrew McCabe, who is the acting director of the FBI, is mentioned as well. So he suggested that he too had a conflict. Mr. McCabe's wife, Jill McCabe, received nearly $500,000 in 2015 during a losing campaign for the Virginia State Senate. And then it goes on to talk about that and Governor Terry McAuliffe, who's a close friend of Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, and on and on. So who is he happy with? Anyone who is close to the investigation and people he appointed and people he hired, he's not happy with them already, and it's just 6 months in.
I think that, look, I mean, I think, as I said, I think that for him, in his mind, Jeff Sessions' recusal was sort of an original sin. Jeff Sessions botching that testimony was an original sin. He was very frustrated that week. Remember, I mean, there was a whole, what set off that whole chain of events where he was tweeting about his phones being tapped by President Obama was that a day earlier he had vented on his staff in frustration that Jeff Sessions had recused himself without telling him. He's been very, very angry about this for quite some time. So, having covered this and written about it before, it is not a surprise to me that he feels this way because all of these things kind of date back to one thing in his mind, I think. It just was surprising to me that he said it as forcefully as he did and as publicly as he did.
Hey, as usual, Maggie Haberman, great reporting. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, absolutely. Now I want to bring in CNN legal analyst Laura Coates, the chief political analyst Gloria Borger, senior White House correspondent Jeff Selny. Where do we start here? I mean, we were supposed to talk about, I thought the big day was about health care and that the president was finally going to get something done, also made in America. Here he is, again, stepping on his own message. I'm not sure why he gave this interview, but it is quite an interesting interview, Gloria. What do you think of this? The most fascinating thing to me is the Department of Justice has somehow now become political. How is that?
Well, first of all, let's talk about Jeff Sessions, as you were talking about with Maggie. I think it's very hard for him to continue in his job. I don't know how he does it. He's supposed to have a press conference tomorrow on another subject, and I'm just kind of wondering what's going to happen at that. You have a president who has not only expressed no confidence, but he's expressed anger in his, in his attorney general. This man, by the way, was the first person to endorse
First senator.
Donald Trump in the Senate, was there from day one, was a close advisor and very important to him. And the loyalty has gone out the window because Jeff Sessions felt, after he miscommunicated, if you want to call it that, in testimony before the Senate about meetings with Russians, that after that he had to recuse himself. And this just gives you an eye-opening look into how Donald Trump regards all the people who work for him. Forget about Comey, whom he fired, but Sessions and Rod Rosenstein and Andrew McCabe, they work for him, in his mind, and not for the American people. Because the grievances that he stated against all of them, in particular Jeff Sessions, was, how could he do this to me? It's not fair to the president. When actually the right thing to do for the American people was to recuse himself. But he blames Sessions for the eventual, all of the things that eventually led to the appointment of the special counsel Mueller, whom he also believes is conflicted. And in some, in some way, because people who work for him have given contributions to Democrats over the years, that they're out to get him.
Jeff Selny, I'm just going to read a little bit, and I got a question for you. While the interview, this is from the New York Times, while the interview touched on an array of issues, including health care, foreign affairs, and politics, the investigation dominated the conversation. He said that as far as he knew, he was not under investigation himself, despite reports that Mr. Mueller is looking into whether the president obstructed justice by firing Comey. I don't think we're under investigation, he said. I'm not under investigation. For what? I didn't do anything. So he insisted, to the Times that he is not under investigation, but he and others in his administration and his family have hired lawyers as part of this investigation. So what do they really think at the White House? Do they think they're not under investigation and they're hiring lawyers just for the fun of it?
Well, Don, you clearly know what is on the top of the president's mind. I mean, this has been something that he has repeated again and again, and virtually every one of the rare interviews he gives, it seems it does come back around to whether he is or is not under investigation. That has been a particular question he's addressed many times. In the interview he did a few months back with Lester Holt of NBC News, wanted to make clear that he was not under investigation. But of course people have hired lawyers here. His son-in-law has, his son has, his former campaign chairman
his own lawyer has.
He has. I mean, the reality is, this is as much, he hasn't called it a hoax recently, but we obviously think he still thinks that. But look, Don, the reality is there are a lot of inquiries going on in this town at this time. There's a special counsel who's looking into this, Robert Mueller, obviously. There's the House inquiry, the Senate inquiry, and we're going to start to see next week potentially Paul Manafort, the former campaign chair, and the president's oldest son, Donald Trump Jr., have been invited to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee by Republican Chairman Chuck Grassley. So we'll see if they accept that invitation. If they don't, they could always subpoena them. And on Monday, Jared Kushner speaking to the Senate Intelligence Committee behind closed doors. So yes, they've hired lawyers because this investigation is really at pretty full speed, Don.
Just real quickly before I get to Laura, do you think that part of giving the reason for giving this interview is because of because they're going to be testifying or they're going to be in front of the...
It's a great question. I'm not sure why he gave this interview when he was supposed to be turning the page to focus on health care. Republican senators sat with him at lunch today and asked him to become more active in selling the idea of the health care bureau. Not the specifics, but to try and get red state America, Trump America, if you will, more on board with this. And then he gives this interview and completely changes the subject once again. I'm not sure if it's to sort of get ahead of that. I don't think so, because the interview that Maggie and Peter Baker and Michael Schmidt did at the New York Times, it was earlier today before those invitations went out to appear next week. So I don't really know why he did it. Certainly very interesting.
I just kept, I was reading it going, did he realize that this was being recorded? It's fascinating to me. So Laura, you being the legal expert that you are, if you were Jeff Sessions, what would you be thinking? How could you continue on?
I mean, the Attorney General serves at the pleasure of the President, and I'm no longer pleasing you, sir. So obviously you have that conflict. But you also have a man who's pretty ambitious, and that's Jeff Sessions, who knows that the Department of Justice figurehead role is far more expansive than simply the Russian investigation and the Russian probe. But imagine what he's actually asking. The President of the United States is saying, had I known that the Attorney General of the United States was not going to be a marionette of the President, I would have found a different puppet. Imagine what that would feel like to the morale of the Department of Justice if he, in fact, was somebody the President considered to be a marionette. In a twisted way, Jeff Sessions, it almost betrays his own credibility by being somebody who's at odds with the President of the United States over the Russian probe. He followed the advice of his counsel, the ethics advisors, to say, I should not be a part of this. And frankly, he has followed suit with that to a certain degree, except for the firing of Comey. He did reinsert himself in there. But imagine, even that did not please and appease his President of the United States.
But isn't he saying that he's saying that about everyone? He's saying that about the acting head of the FBI, the former. He's saying that about Mueller. He's saying that about everyone. Everyone who's investigating him or who does not fall in line and praise him, he's saying there's some nefarious intention there.
This is the definition of scapegoating. I mean, even Baltimore, the city itself, is now being scapegoated as a reason for why this president is now paranoid to the degree that he is. And frankly,
that's a very good word. It's paranoia.
It
reeks of paranoia.
It reeks of paranoia, and the reason that it's so profound in this case is because you have somebody who, on the one hand, is saying, the president is saying, I'd like to, this may have been an issue. I'm not saying who was the actual culprit. It should be investigated. I'm talking about Hillary Clinton as being a villain in many respects, but anyone who tries to vilify me simply must be against me and contrary to patriotism. It's very, very bizarre.
Gloria Borger. So can you imagine tonight, none of the representatives are on, but I'm sure the morning shows, make sure you tune into New Day tomorrow, by the way, because they're going to have to explain they're going to have to explain what the president meant by this interview and somehow call it, oh, this is the president somehow didn't say what he said and it's fake and it's not real and the media's out to get him for putting his own words back in front of him. What must his advisors be thinking tonight?
Well, look, I can't imagine they're happy. I mean, don't forget, as you were mentioning earlier, the president today gave before his meeting with Republicans, before his lunch, if you go back and you listen to that, he had a lot of talking points in front of him that were supplied by his staff, who finally got him to talk about healthcare reform and why their version of healthcare reform, how that would help the American people. They have not had a message about that previously. They have been trying to get this to come out of the president's mouth to talk about this, and he gave a very cogent sort of defense of their healthcare proposal. Then you fast forward or backward, I don't know when this interview actually took place, to the interview that he gave to the New York Times. And it is full of grievances. It is dominated by Russia, although they went out of their way to say, yes, they did hit an array of issues. But there is no unspooling this. I mean, the president said what he said. And it is very clear to me that he has no confidence in his own attorney general, that he's angry at his attorney general. And I think it's very difficult to see how those two operate in the future. And I wonder what Jeff Sessions is thinking of doing tonight, because I don't think he has a lot of great choices in front of him. Because what the president said to him is, you could have avoided all of this for me. Now, if Jeff Sessions wants to get up and answer a journalist's question, who's clearly going to ask about this, and say, I'm my own man, I have to do what's good for the country, good for him. Yeah. But, you
Don,
have to wonder.
I think one other thing, Don, to add to what Gloria was saying, today at the White House was all about trying to get Republican senators back on board. Republican senators like Jeff Sessions, he's one of them. So I think it's ending in an extraordinary way, as Gloria was saying. He has now certainly aggravated Republican senators who was trying to sort of appease and win over on health care by saying this about Jeff Sessions. So it's a very sort of odd set of events here. Yeah. But in many ways, I think it could strengthen the Attorney General, as Laura was saying earlier. I mean, it certainly shows that he is his own man in this respect here. But tomorrow will be a fascinating day when Jeff Sessions reports to work.
And remember,
by the way,
Robert Mueller is not just his own man. Robert Mueller can't just be fired willy-nilly by the President of the United States. Rod Rosenstein is the one who holds the power in that. And by the way, if Rosenstein tries to do so, the special counsel has protections with Congress. He has to actually do it for an actual reason. He can't have a willy-nilly reason, and Congress can hold a full hearing to figure out whether or not the reason was in fact sound. It can't be as the President tries to just air a grievance and suddenly the strings are cut.
Way to alienate all the people around you who could either help or hurt you. Thank you very much, Gloria. Stick around. When we come right back, an American hero's latest battle. John McCain diagnosed with brain cancer, and that news has shocked many of the people closest to him and those who only know him from afar. We're going to have the latest from
Happening now, breaking news, backflip. President Trump tells GOP senators that inaction on health care is not an option, a day after he seemed to acknowledge defeat, promising to let Obamacare fail. Tonight, his new push is complicated by a devastating new projection of how a Republican bill could hurt tens of millions of Americans. Strong-arming, the Senate Republican leader is promising a health care vote next week as Mr. Trump looks to flip critical no votes to yes. This hour, GOP members who may be wavering are about to meet on the Hill. Private conversation. The White House is refusing to reveal what was said during the president's second meeting with Vladimir Putin, denying the previously undisclosed session was kept secret. We'll look at the many unanswered questions about their discussion. And readying launch. North Korea appears to be getting ready for another ballistic missile test soon. We are tracking new intelligence on Kim Jong-un's regime and his goal of being able to strike the United States. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. Wolf Blitzer is on assignment. I'm Brianna Keeler. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking right now, we are learning about a date for Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort to testify before the Senate. Stand by for more information on that. Also breaking, head-spinning new twists as Republicans try to revive health care legislation 24 hours after its stunning collapse. We're standing by for a meeting of GOP senators under new pressure from President Trump to get a bill passed. Republicans getting chilling new information a short while ago as well. A new nonpartisan estimate that repealing Obamacare without an immediate replacement would mean 32 million more Americans would be uninsured within the next decade, and costs would skyrocket. The bombshell coming after Mr. Trump urged GOP senators not to leave town for their August recess until a bill is on his desk. This is a stark reversal a day after Mr. Trump seemed to be giving up, saying he was ready to simply let Obamacare fail amid mounting Republican opposition. And tonight, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he'll hold a procedural vote next week aimed at moving health care forward. But so far, there's no evidence that he or the president have flipped any crucial Republican no votes. Also breaking, the White House is denying there's a cloud of secrecy surrounding President Trump's second meeting with Vladimir Putin. Spokeswoman Sarah Huckabee Sanders refusing to reveal what the two presidents discussed for nearly an hour at the G20 summit. Some Democrats are calling the previously undisclosed conversation without any U.S. national security officials present deeply troubling. This hour, I will talk about those stories and more with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. He is a Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and our correspondents and specialists are standing by for us. First, I want to go to CNN's Ryan Nobles. He has more on this wrangling over health care. And Ryan, Republican senators are meeting soon on health care. This estimate, this cost about their bill, what is that going to do to this meeting?
Well, Brianna, there's no doubt that this makes the process a lot more difficult for Republicans as they wrestle their way for an attempt to go forward on health care. This new score from the Congressional Budget Office is another devastating score. It is on the plan just to repeal Obamacare without a replacement. And the nonpartisan office predicts that the number of people uninsured would skyrocket and that the cost of premiums would go up as well. And it all comes at a time as Senate Republicans and the White House appear to be moving back to Plan A.
Tonight, a dramatic reversal from President Trump on health care reform.
Inaction is not an option. And frankly, I don't think we should leave town unless we have a health insurance plan, unless we can give our people great health care, because we're close.
The president pushing Republican senators at the White House today to not give up on repealing and replacing Obamacare.
We're in this room today to deliver on our promise to the American people to repeal Obamacare and to ensure that they have the health care that they need. We can repeal it, but the best is repeal and replace, and let's get going.
This just one day after suggesting he was ready to let Obamacare collapse.
Let Obamacare fail, it'll be a lot easier. And I think we're probably in that position where we'll just let Obamacare fail.
And the day before that, tweeting, quote, Republicans should just repeal failing Obamacare now and work on a new health care plan that will start from a clean slate. Dems will join in. Tonight, the president returning to his party's long-standing campaign pledge to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act.
I intend to keep my promise, and I know you will too.
And in an awkward moment, the president calling out Nevada Senator Dean Heller by name. Heller, a key swing vote on health care, who recently became a target of a political action committee that supports the president.
This was the one we were worried about. You weren't there, but you're going to be. You're going to be. Look, he wants to remain a senator, doesn't he? Okay.
The president's message was clear. There will be consequences for those who choose to block a bill from getting to the floor.
Any senator who votes against starting debate is really telling America that you're fine with Obamacare.
After the meeting, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell pledged to hold a vote to take up health care next week and expressed confidence he would have the votes.
We cannot keep the commitment we made to the American people to repeal and replace Obamacare unless we get on the bill. Next week, we'll be voting on the motion to proceed. And I have every expectation that we'll be able to get on the bill.
But even now, it seems as though that goal of even getting the bill on the floor seems very unlikely for Mitch McConnell, because even though the president made a big push today to these senators to try and come together and come with a plan to both repeal and replace Obamacare, all the lingering divisions between the moderate wing and the conservative wing of the Republican Party still exist. They're going to attempt to hash it out tonight in a meeting that's going to take place in a little more than an hour. But, Brianna, there is no doubt they have a long way to go.
Ryan Nobles, thank you for that report. Now to the breaking news on Senate testimony by Donald Trump Jr. and former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. I want to bring in CNN senior White House correspondent Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, a date has been set. This is going to be big.
A date indeed has been set, Brianna. 1 week, next Wednesday, July 26th, is the date that Paul Manafort, the former chairman of the Trump campaign last summer, and Donald Trump Jr., the president's oldest son, will testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee next Wednesday. Now, this is going to be a fascinating bit of testimony, and it's going to be in public session. The committee is just announcing it just a few moments ago. They are going to be part of 7 or 8 witnesses who will be questioned that day, but certainly they are the two who are the closest members of the president's inner circle. And of course, one of the things that the Senate wants to ask about is that meeting from June of 2016 that we've been talking about so often, the meeting with the Russian government lawyer, the lobbyist, and others here. So that is going to be the first opportunity that senators have to question them next Wednesday on Capitol Hill before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Brianna.
And the White House has been pressed on this, right? The second meeting with President Trump that he had with Vladimir Putin.
It is. It's another day, another explanation of a Russian-related meeting here. But this is stemming from a meeting at the G20 in Hamburg, Germany, almost a couple weeks or so ago. We saw the meeting between the Russian president and the U.S. president happening, but we're only learning now is that there was another meeting that evening that actually happened, but the White House will not say what they talked about. Here's Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the deputy press secretary, taking questions this afternoon.
They had a brief conversation, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of the conversation, but again, this was a social dinner where the president spoke with many world leaders, as is the purpose. I think it would be incredibly awkward for them to all sit at a dinner and not speak to each other, and I would imagine that all of you would agree with that.
So she was pressed again and again, though, on what subjects were discussed. If it was election meddling, if it was Syria, if it was Russian sanctions or something else altogether. And she said, she simply didn't know and didn't have the answer there. But Brianna, the reason this is such an interesting issue to many national security advisors and folks on Capitol Hill in both parties is that there was no U.S. official present there. This was a meeting that just happened to take place in the middle of a dinner here. And the White House did not disclose it until 11 days after the fact, only after it had already leaked out. So yet another Russian meeting raising some controversy here again tonight at the White House. Brianna.
Jeff Zeleny at the White House, thank you. We're also getting some more information about testimony related to the Russia investigation. I want to go to Gloria Borger now. Give us the latest here. These are some new developments.
Yes, we're just learning from Jared Kushner's attorney, Abbe Lowell, that Jared Kushner is prepared to testify in closed session before the Senate Intelligence Committee on Monday. That would be July 24th. And there is a statement from Abbe Lowell that says, as Mr. Kushner has been saying since March, he has been and is prepared to voluntarily cooperate and provide whatever information he has on the investigations to Congress. And then further, Mr. Lowell says, working with and being responsive to the schedules of the committees, we have arranged Mr. Kushner's interview with the Senate for July 24. He will continue to cooperate and appreciates the opportunity to assist in putting this matter to rest. So, to repeat, that's closed-door testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee next Monday. So, Brianna, you have a week of testimony coming up on some key people in this Russia investigation.
No, it's going to be very interesting next week.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you a question. You may not know the answer to this, Gloria, but I wonder if you think this may be an indication that Robert Mueller has already talked to Jared Kushner. Has that been sort of the way we've seen things go?
It's not necessarily that he's talked to him. It's very clear, though, that the committees and Mr. Mueller are cooperating.
Mm-hmm.
They do not want to step on each other in any way, shape, or form. It may be an indication that Mr. Mueller says, go right ahead and talk to him, and that could mean that Jared Kushner is not at the center of his investigation, or, as you point out, that he's already spoken with him. But I think that it's what we do know is that the committees are not doing anything to get in the special counsel's way.
All right, Gloria Borger, thank you so much.
Sure.
So much news going on here, and I want to get more on all of this with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. He's a Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. I mean, you hear it there. We've got this price tag on the health care bill, all of this testimony that we're going to see next week from Paul Manafort, Donald Jr., and behind closed doors, Jared Kushner. Testifying before your committee next week, Donald Jr. and Paul Manafort. What are you hoping to learn from them, sir?
Well, I think it's important that we begin to get testimony under oath. There has been an enormous amount that has been said publicly, but it's not under oath, which means that people are free to omit matters or lie with relative impunity. So the American public has not been steadily getting the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And a formal hearing changes that, because testimony in a hearing is subject to false statement. Prosecution is subject to perjury charges. And so it's about time that we began to get some of these people under oath. And I'm very pleased that Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Feinstein have organized this opening hearing.
So what are the key questions that you would like to ask? I mean, for instance, Donald Jr. seemed to have different initial explanations of this meeting at Trump Tower. Are you going to try to square what, I mean, folks behind Donald Jr. say, no, he didn't have two different stories, but it's pretty clear he did. Are those the kind of things you're going to try to square?
I think there's going to be a lot of interest in a variety of different issues. I will be down the row a little bit in terms of the order of questioning, so you've got to be flexible and be able to ask meaningful questions that aren't redundant with ones that were just asked by other colleagues. So we'll be working our way through that.
But Republicans trying to agree on replacing Obamacare, we'll talk about that ahead.